What is going on, all you Pokemon collecting maniacs out there? This is Ryan, the PikiPikaPapa, and here we are with our monthly deep dive into the world of Pokemon grading, and I love this data set. I think there are so many morsels of awesomeness that we can take out of this. I just get really excited to pull it together every month, and this month is no different. So we're going to look, obviously, on this first page, we're going to look at the grading volume from the biggest graders out there, PSA, SGC, CGC, and Beckett, and then we're going to double click into PSA because if you look at the graph on the left, I mean, those are the cards that are graded by the different vendors, and PSA is up there, and I mean, everybody else is, I got to do a separate graph in the middle just to show you everybody else's monthly trends in grading volume. So we're going to look at PSA particularly, the most graded sets, the most graded cards, the most graded characters. We're going to look at gem rates by era for all of these. We're going to look at so much information, and the reason that we do this every month is because, at least as far as I'm concerned, when I'm trying to figure out what's going on at the macro level of the hobby, right? Like all of us, including myself, you know, the people who are out here on YouTube, we get really focused in certain areas, but there are so many more things that are going on outside of the areas that we're focused on, and videos like this really help me look kind of beyond the now, beyond what's actually right in front of me, and it helps me identify some other opportunities, and at least what other people in the hobby are looking at, because in order for any card or any set or anything to make this list, I promise you, there has to be a ton of momentum behind it. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to take a look at all of this, and if I get into this video and you find it informative and you find it fun, listen, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. We got a small channel. We do a ton of work, and that really helps us out. And if you like what you see, give us a thumbs up, or if you got questions or comments, drop them down below. Now, if you've been watching this series every single month, you know that PSA has been wildly inconsistent with the number of cards it has been grading month over month, and you can see that if you look again on the graph on the left. Those are the grading volume by PSA by month ever since January of 2022. So we have a ton of different data points on here. And what stands out over the last 6 months are these wild peaks and then the subsequent valleys. And I've said this over the last couple of videos. That's not great. The reason I don't think that's great is because that's not driven by these very varying amount of submissions, right? Like, it's not like submission volume is crazy high one month, crazy down the next month. Like, I think the submission volume is relatively flat. You know, they're getting the same numbers in, or maybe gradually growing. As you can see, PSA's grading volume has gradually been growing, so it's maybe gradually growing, but it hasn't been spiking and dropping like this. So to me, it tells me there might be some operational inefficiencies. I did a video the other day about some of the changes PSA is doing. I know they're trying to automate more. They're trying to get it to the place where they can actually get the cards back to you much quicker than they are right now. And they're actually trying to lower the price. They think that they would rather get the cards back to you in a faster manner at a lower price than anything else. So maybe that's what they're doing. Maybe it's, you know, upsetting the apple cart. But again, even with all of that inefficiency, like, guess what happened? They broke another record last month. It was a record-breaking month for PSA. The most cards PSA has ever graded, period, in a month coming in. I think it was 1.47 million cards graded in a single month. And then on the far right-hand side, those are the actual items graded in the TCG space. So again, the graph on the left shows you the total number of items graded by these different grading companies. And on the right is what really matters to you and me, us TCG collectors out there. And there's a couple stories to tell here. So you see PSA had a big month-over-month gain, up 29%. Remember, I talked about the spikes and the valleys. Well, guess what? We were coming off a valley, big spike, up 29%. But for me, the big takeaway is the grading volume is up 2% year over year. And if you remember, a year ago in June, they launched the PSA Grading Center in Japan. So I have been saying that year over year comps are going to be challenging because when PSA opened that grading center in Japan, it was absolutely flooded. There was all kind of pent up demand in Japan. And so the grading volume went through the roof. So the fact that in last month, we are comping positive to last year, which is so close to when that PSA Grading Center in Japan opened, that's very exciting for me. It lets me know that the TCG grading volume as a whole is doing really well. Now, when you look at the other three grading companies and their year-over-year numbers, not so great. CGC is down 31% in TCG year-over-year. Beckett is down 40% year-over-year. And SGC, which is now owned by PSA, it is operating as an independent subsidiary right now, but SGC is down 59%. So out of all of the grading companies, and even with PSA comping against that really unique event with that Pokemon grading center opening up over there in Japan, they're still up 2% year-over-year. So PSA obviously has a lot of good things going for them. Now, when you look at the middle graph right there, there's a couple takeaways. First off, I love Beckett. I always share this. I have a lot of fond memories of Beckett, but Beckett just cannot get their stuff together here in the grading space, and they're just continuing to fall off pace compared to all of the other grading companies. Now, CGC, I want you to take a look at that. CGC had a big spike, just like PSA did, right? When you look at their month-over-month grading volume there in the TCG space, it's up 32%. There's going to be a reason I want you to focus on that further on in the video, but keep an eye on it. And SGC, it's up month-over-month, but again, it was down off of its own big spike a couple months ago. So trend lines are what I really care about. You're going to have these, abnormal months where things spike and drop, nothing like PSA, but you'll have a little bit ebbs and flows along the way. So if you trend line it out, I still think SGC has a really strong growth line to it, and even CGC, if you trend line that out, I think CGC is doing okay. But again, remember that spike. We're going to talk about that later on in this video. Now, with that out of the way, let's start getting into some of the detail stuff. And here we go. So these are the most graded sets at PSA last month in the TCG space. Now, English and Japanese 151 have literally been trading top spots for like a year now. It's absolutely crazy. As soon as 151 came out and as soon as those first cards started getting set over to PSA, they've just been, the volume hasn't slowed down, right? Now, the Japanese volume is much higher than the English volume, but I had a comment the other day, which was a really smart call out, and I didn't even think about it because I don't do Japanese cards, but obviously you have Master Balls in the Japanese 151 set, so you're gonna have a lot more grading volume because a lot of people are getting those Master Balls graded, which are really cool cards. But those still, they have been number one and number two. The other thing you've heard me talk about is how much I love Crown Zenith. What a fun set to open and rip. The cards are beautiful. It's got an awesome lineup. But when you look at the grading volume of Crown Zenith, there is over 229,000 Crown Zenith cards that have been graded. Now, again, remember, super deep set, lots of cards worth grading in there. But for an ultra modern English set, that is a lot of cards to have been graded. And I don't think that grading number is going to slow down anytime soon, right? Like, there's still lots of Crown Zenith products out there. So as much as I love the set and I love the cards, when I think about the long-term opportunity for price growth, just remember it has been graded into the frickin' ground. Now, coming in at number 4, you got the 1999 Pokemon game, which is really exciting. That includes base set, shadowless, and first edition. So, there's a lot that's lumped into that 844,000 cards that have been graded, but it's always exciting to see that base set up here on the list. And now you got Japanese Sword and Shield V-Star Universe. We've talked about V-Star Universe. Again, set that's absolutely been graded to the 9th degree, right? 465,000 V-Star Universe cards have been graded. I love seeing Twilight Masquerade on here. We're going to talk about a particular card in a minute, which is helping drive that. And then I like seeing Black Star promos on here. You got a couple different Black Star promos, one from 2024, one from 2023. They do it by year, so we always talk about promos and stamped cards and all the excitement around them and the prices that they're able to actualize. So both of them on here. And then, of course, Evolving Skies is on here. Evolving Skies is just having its moment in the sun. It is obviously the biggest and the best set from the Sword and Shield era, and it's nice to see that people are still having those cards graded. It's very exciting. And then you got Paradise Dragona. Don't get me wrong, you're going to see Surging Sparks on here, but remember, the difference between this and when a set actually launches is, remember, people have to rip the packs, they have to get the cards, they have to send them into PSA, and this only registers when they are actually graded, so there is a long tail from when a set launches to when we actually see it on this list. But I guarantee you we're going to see Surging Sparks on here, just like we see Paradise Dragona on here right now. Now, the next thing that we're looking at, most graded cards, and I've got to say this, I didn't think it was ever going to happen. I really didn't. I thought that Pikachu with Gray Felt Hat was going to be the #1 card from now until the end of time. It has spent 10 consecutive months at the #1 spot for the most graded individual TCG card, and finally it has been upended. And I'm going to be honest with you, I did not expect this to be the card that would upend it, but the Shrouded Fables, the wood art Pokemon that they have, which is in the boxes, it's a Black Star promo, the Greninja variant, that was the most graded card last month at PSA, so really cool. I love the artwork on that card. I think the card's an absolute stunner. The raw card's all the way up to $15, so I think that card has a very bright future, but that card comes in at #1, and Pikachu with Gray Felt Hat has finally been dropped to #2. Now, interesting, coming in at #3, we've got another Pikachu Japanese promo. Now, we know the Japanese cards and their promo cards are absolutely awesome. I'm so incredibly jealous of it, so interesting to see that one up there. And then you got the Kingdra coming in at #4, the same art, the same Black Star promo, the same variety as the Greninja that's up there at #1. And now, of course, you got the 151 Charizard, obviously one of the best cards of the entire Scarlet and Violet era, from one of the best sets of the entire era, and 151, that Charizard's something very special. Now, remember that Charizard does have a very low gem rate compared to a lot of its peers, so it's going to be interesting to see where the final PSA 10 population ends up for that. Now, Twilight Masquerade, as I said, there's one card that's really been driving the grading volume there, and that's that Eevee Illustration Rare. I love that card, and I have not pulled the trigger on it specifically because I want to get it in a nice condition, or I'll just go ahead and buy it in a PSA 10. There's already 5,300 of those that have been graded, and remember that the grading, or the print quality has improved by leaps and bounds at this point in Scarlet and Violet versus the beginning, so there's going to be a lot of these PSA 10 Eevee Illustration Rare cards out there. So that's why I'm holding back a little bit. I'm going to wait till the price comes down. I'm going to wait till I get a PSA 10 at what I consider to be a fair price, and I'll go ahead and pull the trigger on it. And that's one of the things that I always walk away from this video. Lots of awesome learnings, right? And then of course you got another Japanese card down there, a Pikachu art rare, another Japanese card down there, a Charmander art rare, and then again another Japanese, and again another Japanese. And I did that on purpose because I don't know if you remember, but a year ago, back when those PSA grading center opened up in Japan, this whole list of most graded cards were Japanese cards. And ever since then, we've seen them slowly fade away. Last month, we only had 2 Japanese cards on the list. So now we have a good number on here. There's a lot of Japanese cards on this list. So we talk about how the Pokemon market can rotate. It can rotate English in favor, Japanese in favor. So it'll be interesting to see if the Japanese cards start getting a little more love. So really cool takeaways there, and an awesome list of the most graded cards from a TCG perspective at PSA. Coming in here is my own creation. Now, if you watch this channel for the last 2 years, as long as this channel has been around, I started off with this hypothesis, I think, and I still believe in this. It's going to take longer than I had originally thought, but I do think at some point TCG as a whole is going to be more popular than ball sports, and that's a big thing, right? Football, basketball, baseball are huge. I'm a huge sports guy. I played football all the way through college, like absolutely love sports, but I think TCG and the globalization of it, I think has the opportunity, at least from a cardboard perspective, to be the biggest player in the market. So I've always been kind of tracking the TCG number of cards that have been graded versus baseball, basketball, and football combined, okay? So the orange line represents what I call ball sports, right? And the blue line is Pokemon. And if you'll see, really for the first year and a half, they were neck and neck. They were trading blows, right? All the way up until 2024. Then we saw ball sports take off and we saw Pokemon come down. Now, remember, Scarlet and Violet in the beginning at least wasn't that hot. We were waiting for a lot of chase cards, but over the last couple months, we've at least seen the ball sports and the Pokemon sports, or excuse me, the Pokemon trends move in lockstep, right? We see both of them shoot up significantly this month. Last month, we saw both of them come down a little bit. So it's nice to see them moving in lockstep. And as we get further and further into Scarlet and Violet, now we have Surging Sparks. Obviously, we have Twilight Masquerade, right? We got, the new Eevee set that's coming out, right? Like there's just all kinds of excitement. We got a Team Rocket set that's going to be coming out at some point. Like I think we're going to see the grading volume here in the Pokemon space really start to take off. So it's going to be interesting to see how it compares to ball sports. And I'm very excited to see how this graph moves over 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road. The next thing that we look at, most graded subjects, and guess what? This almost never changes. Charizard, Pikachu, Mew, that is almost always your 1, 2, 3. A year ago, Pikachu was number 1. Pikachu had the number 1 spot for like 4 or 5 months, but then Charizard came back, and Charizard has not relinquished that lead. Then you got Mew, you got Mewtwo, you got Blastoise, and then Monkey D. Luffy from One Piece. Remember, this is a TCG list, so even though the only cards we've seen up to this point have been Pokemon, this includes all TCGs. This includes Magic the Gathering, it includes One Piece, it includes Yu-Gi-Oh! I mean, you name it. All of it is lumped in here. The problem is it only highlights Pokemon cards because when you're talking about it, Pokemon has absolutely the most volume, which is why I think in the long run that is going to be the best franchise to invest in, and that's why I'm doing it, right? Then you got Eevee, you got Venusaur, you got Umbreon, you got Gengar, you got Charmander, and you got Greninja coming in at the very bottom. Greninja is new to the list. Obviously, when you have a card, which is the number 1 graded singles card, you're going to have the character make the list as well. So lots of cool stuff here. Not a lot of big changes. There's never really a lot of big changes. And actually, if I'm being honest, that's one of the things that does give me concern about the long term of Pokemon. You know, when you look at the ball sports, when you look at the baseball, football, basketball, the most graded subjects, they rotate. You have new rookies who come in, you have new players who get hot. There's always different people where the market is focused on. But here we have the same characters that we're always focused on. I get it, there's new art, and I get it's exciting. Obviously, I don't think it's enough of a concern for me not to personally be invested because I am very heavily, but it is one of the concerns that I have for the long-term viability of Pokemon card investing and collecting. Now, the next thing that we're looking at is gem rates by era. Now, the reason that I wanted you to focus on that big spike in CGC is because normally there's not a lot to talk about on this. Normally, what we see is the gem rate by era stays relatively flat because why would it change? I mean, if the grading parameters are exactly the same, and if it's the same people doing the same grading, and if you have the same standards, you wouldn't really expect it to change a lot. There was one exception, right? Earlier in the year, when Scarlet and Violet had the really bad print quality, we saw the PSA, actually we saw everybody's TCG 20 2020s era, we saw that relatively lower. Then once it started to rotate into the higher quality sets that have been launched, we've started to see it slowly work its way up. But I am going through all of this simply to say it was an interesting takeaway that we saw the grading volume in CGC spike, and you look at the 2020's gem rate for CGC cards over there on the far right at 61.6%. It was at 50% prior to this. Last month it was at 51%, I think. Yeah, so PSA month over month is down 1.5% in the gem rate for the 2020 era. SGC is down 0.8% in the 2020 era month over month. Beckett is down 3.1%. You kind of got to take Beckett with a grain of salt because the people who are sending into Beckett are trying to get the black labels, right? They're trying to get those black labels, so they're sending the best of the best there. So the gem rate in Beckett is going to be organically higher. If you send the best of your best, they're expecting a perfect card. A lot of them are going to fall into that gem range. But then CGC, as I said, it's up almost 10% month over month, up 9.9%. I'm not saying they're doing anything nefarious. I'm not saying they're breaking any rules. I'm not saying that they're doing anything wonky. I just thought it was interesting that a big spike in grading volume and a big spike in gem rate in the 2020s. So I thought I'd call it out because that's what I do on this channel. Now, the next thing that we're talking about right here, I always do this, and I think it's interesting because I am a big trend guy. I like to see long-term positive trends. I like to see things grow organically over time. Doesn't mean you're not going to have spikes and valleys, and it doesn't mean that you're not going to have anomalies over the course of time, but this is the TCG grading card volume at PSA by month ever since January of 2022. And if you draw a trend line out from January of 2022 all the way really until November, December of 2024, it's pretty straight. Again, you have your seasonality, which is baked into here, right? You have your ebbs and your flows, but if you trend line it out, it's a pretty good line. But then if you look at it from all of 2024 up until the last couple months, it was working its way down. It was going against previous trends. Now, again, because of the way Pokemon works, because of the way the eras work, there's 3 years for every era. Typically, the first year isn't as great as the second, and typically the third is better than the second is to begin. That's all going to drive grading volume. So again, we need more data sets. We need to look at this over a longer period of time. But it was very interesting in all of 2024 to see the grading volume in the TCG space dropping. Now, over the last couple of months, we've seen some really strong numbers. Again, 2 months ago, we saw 518,000 cards graded. Then it dropped off a cliff. Last month, we saw 383,000. And then this month, we're talking about 506,000 being graded. So again, I want to see more consistency, but it's interesting. Maybe we're starting to turn the corner. We got some awesome sets and some awesome cards coming out and some awesome promos. So maybe now we're going to start to see those numbers be more consistent in the upward and right trajectory. So the last thing we always talk about is, listen, overall grading, I think it's important, right? Like, I think it is important for a healthy card market. And I think a healthy card market in general is important to Pokemon investing. I want baseball to be a great investment. I want football cards to be a great investment. I want basketball cards and hockey cards and soccer cards. I want card collecting in general, TCG, sports, wrestling, you name it. I want all of that to be a viable investment opportunity for people now and long into the future. And so when I see this is the overall grading volume at PSA, irregardless of set or era or type of card or anything like that. Again, when you trend line this out, going back to May of 2021, all the way through till now, there's a very, very healthy growth rate here. And again, I think grading is important. I think that it's a great way to store long-term value. People invest in graded cards, right? I think that there's a lot of good things when the market shows a healthy grading volume. And so that's what we're seeing. It's very cool. And I think that the market is in a very healthy spot. And I think particularly here in the TCG space, particularly in the Pokemon space, I think we have a really, really exciting 6 or 8 months ahead of us. I can't wait to get into the final year of Scarlet and Violet. I can't wait to see what awesome cards and awesome things they have in store for us. And I think Scarlet and Violet as a whole has been really special. I think it doesn't get all of the love it deserves. And matter of fact, I might do a video on that, comparing Scarlet and Violet to some recent eras. But with that out of the way, listen, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it wasn't too much data. If you had fun and you made it to the end and you haven't hit the subscribe button yet, what are you doing? Hit that subscribe button. If you got questions or comments, drop them down below. And as always, if you like what you see, give us a big old thumbs up. I appreciate you more than I can say. Hope you have an epic one. I'll talk to you soon, everybody. See you. Bye.